What's going on, Dolphins fans? It is your boy Dillon, and so day 3 just ended for the Dolphins. They just had their last pick. There's still about 20-ish picks left as of right now, but unless they find some way to trade back up into the 7th round in those last like 15-20 picks, which I very much doubt, then they should be done with their draft. Going into day 3, into today, they had 3 picks. They had a 5th rounder and 2 7th rounders, and they started the day right as the Dolphins were coming up, and when they got on the clock, before they made a pick, they actually traded the pick to the Steelers for a 4th rounder next year. So, normally, and I've said that, for me, if I'm going to trade, I'm going to trade back and accumulate more. Having said that, though, this is probably the one circumstance where I don't really like it, because of the fact that there was a large window of time in rounds 4, 5, and 6 with no picks. So they went 3 straight rounds on day 6. It's just, day 3 picks, whatever. Okay, the lower, but they still have very important things that they need to fill, spots that they need to fill. And I mean, like, why? Why would you? Okay, that 4th rounder next year's cool, but I'm telling you, man, this is going to be the make it or break it year. If they don't meet the expectations, right? And 100%, they have to go to the playoffs. If they're going to go to the playoffs, they're going to have to at least win 10 games. Period. So, and, in so doing, they will also be competitive within the division, because to win 10 games, you're going to have to at least win some divisional games. You would think maybe against the Jets and the Patriots, for sure, right? You would think, right, being a 10-win team last year, that they could at least get a win, maybe sweep the Jets and get a win on the Patriots, maybe even pull out a win against the Bills when they go to Florida, right? You would think. So those are the expectations for the season. But if they do not meet those expectations, if they do not win 10 games, if they do not go to the playoffs, and even worse, if they, God forbid, if they were to win only, let's say, 4 or 5 games, right? Or maybe 6 games, right? If they were to take a step back that far, I 100% guarantee that Stephen Ross is not going to keep them around. If that happens, if that's, if they were to drop back to only winning, 4 to 6 games or whatever after that 10-win season, 100% he's firing them. It's a little less likely, I think, if they ended up being 8-9 or 9-8. But I still have the feeling, and I'm leaning towards, that even with a 9-8 record, if they didn't hit double digits and make the playoffs, I'm still pretty sure that Stephen Ross is going to hit the reset button again. And the reason why I believe that is for a couple reasons. One, because literally every coach that he has hired, he has fired somewhere between the 3 to 3.5 year mark. They are in year 3. At the end of this year, they will be done with year 3. So, they'll be approaching it. And the reason why I think he won't wait, right, and give them into their 4th year, is because he's getting older and more desperate each and every year. So if it doesn't pan out this year, I have a feeling he's just going to, in his desperation, be like, okay, I don't think you guys, you had it in 2020. but you lost it in 2021. And unfortunately, you know, if they do regress, I think it will expose weaknesses that were already there, that got masked a little bit by their 10-win season. And I think he's gonna not like it. Anyway, that's what I think. Let's go ahead and get into these picks though, right? So, but the unquestionable part is this is the make or break year, right? Because the expectations are so high, right? And because 2019, they did what they were supposed to do. They did what Stephen Ross told them to do. They tanked the season. People can argue it as much as they like, and they can say, well, they won 5 games, and that's a reason why, or the evidence that they weren't. But that's not accurate at all. And when you actually look at the full breadth of information and data and evidence that there is, it's clearly not the case. They constructed the team in such a way by depleting it of talent, leadership, etc., to be non-competitive. They created a lesser competitive roster on purpose. And then, you know, a lot of people don't see it or want to admit it or whatever, but Brian Flores and his coaching staff absolutely 100% through player personnel usage, through play calling, through uses of timeouts and challenges, etc., through these various different means, intentionally tried to put the team in position to fail as opposed to win, so that they wouldn't accumulate too many wins so they could still pick in the top 5. And they did. And they got their guy. They got Tua. That's what they were supposed to do. That was their job. Those were the orders given to them by Stephen Ross, and they executed those orders. And then in the second year, they went out. They were big spenders in free agency, right? They got all these fucking, you know, high-profile players, a bunch of them, several of them, spent easily over $100 million, which set themselves up to have all the cap troubles that they have now, which, by the way, they don't currently have enough money to sign their draft class. And I think, let's also add in that I think that had something to do with why they decided to trade away their 5th round pick for a pick next year, because that makes the draft class a little bit smaller and the price tag of it go down a little bit. And I think that had something to do with it, if I'm being honest. So, but the cap issues that they're having were created by that big spending spree that they have, you know, just 1 year later acknowledged and recognized was a giant mistake. Well, if you're so good at your jobs, why couldn't you realize that then? Anyway, but, you know, a lot of people say that it paid off, right? Because we got a 10-win season. Okay. But that wasn't so much that the Dolphins were really that much better. It was because it was, look, and that's not to say that there weren't improvements. The defense absolutely did take a step forward as compared to the 2019 season. And they did show moments of dominance. But you were never going to get a truly dominant fucking defense with those guys. They've never been that. And that's what I said at the time. And that's what they have come to realize since then is oh man, we paid these guys like superstars, but they're never going to be superstars. And that's part of the reason why I think, though, that the defense is going to regress this year. Because while they're never going to be superstars, they gave you a decent, solid, and, you know, occasionally flashy, dominant defense, especially since, of course, they had, you know, Xavier Howard and Devon Godshaw and a couple, you know, premier players from the previous regime. Bobby McCain, right? Some other good guys, right? So, Jerome Baker, right? To help fill out that roster. But they already lost a bunch of those guys, and they could even potentially lose some more going forward. So that's a concern. And so, you know, they've set themselves up in a hole, and I didn't like not having that 5th round pick to try and fill some of those holes, because you still really need a center. You still really needed a running back. I mean, there were options there. You could have picked there, right? And at the end of this, I'm going to go through and do a full round 1 to 7, how I would have done things differently. But anyway, but let's get a further in, because then they, you know, they trade the pick in 5th. So then, okay, we don't have a pick now. Round 5 goes by. Round 6 goes by because we don't have a pick in round 6. Round 7 comes up. We only have to wait a few spots. I think it was 4. And then they decide to take Larnell Coleman, offensive tackle, out of... Where is he out of? I'm not seeing it right here. Anyway, Larnell Coleman, offensive tackle. So, on one hand, you definitely need more help on the offensive line. I'm going to get to what I would have done differently. Obviously, I would have preferred Penei Sewell and Miners, which I'll get to in a minute. But we're starting to have an issue on the offensive line similar to what we have with wide receiver, for example. We have 14 wide receivers on the roster. There are too many bodies, right? So you're going to have to cut some of these guys. So if you're going to get another offensive lineman, why not grab a center or somebody who is supposed to be a center? This dude wouldn't even be projected at center because of his body frame, etc., which I'll get into his scouting report in a minute. You got to take somebody on that, but they clearly don't care about center or even a running back, right? To be fair, then they did take a running back with their next pick, which we'll get to in a minute, but it's super frustrating. So let's get into this. He's 6'6" and 1/4 inches in height. He's 307 pounds. His positives: large frame with a lean build, premier length, and big hands. Quiet, smooth feet, and fluid movement skills in space. I think that was a typo. I think they meant to say quick, smooth feet, and fluid movement skills in space. Maybe they meant quiet. It just doesn't seem to fit for me, so I'm going to assume they meant quick. Uses his length well to lock out, press, and keep defenders at his fingertips. Solid leg drive with a finisher's mentality. Team captain with an unheralded background and valuable experience at both tackle spots. Also, another part of this is, if you're taking another tackle, do you really trust the guys that you have on the roster? Again, man, I think people are going to find out this offensive line is really not as good as what they think it is. And when they get, the league back healthy from the incredible amount of injuries they had last year, not to mention they're going to technically have a tougher schedule for being in the upper half of the league wins-wise and so on and so forth, right? For having a 10-win season. Not that I really put too much emphasis on that, although we will on, I think it's the 21st, so I think it's still like 3 weeks away, if I'm not mistaken. But the schedule will be coming out soon, so we will take a look at that. But anyway, so I think people are going to realize this offensive line is really not as good as they think it is once they start, having to go up against the league at its full strength, right? Like the Patriots, for example, are going to have a ton of guys come back on that defense from opting out, right? Or at least we expect. I expect there. I haven't seen any reason, and it seems as if the NFL is going to go forward as if it's a completely normal season. So they're going to have training camps, live in-person training camps. They're going to have, full stadiums for games and all of that. So what that tells me is yes, there are going to be injuries in the league, but you can expect that it won't be as pervasive and severe as it was last year, completely decimating like full rosters, right? Like the 49ers, the Jets, for example. There are a couple teams, but completely decimating full rosters because they didn't have a full proper offseason to condition and, throughout the season, clubs would have to close down and shut their doors and so on and so forth. Now, I don't see COVID going away or really getting better, especially as this thing continues to mutate like crazy. And they think that, bringing large crowds of people together is going to somehow prevent that simply because people have these, these vaccines or masks. They were never able to control the masks thing to begin with and are not going to be able to now. And even if you're vaccinated, it doesn't prevent it from getting around, spreading to people, etc., etc., etc. Not everybody's going to be vaccinated. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they can track that. Maybe they can make sure, but I'm telling you, man, it's setting up for a bad situation. But either way, it looks like they're going full in. And one ramification of that is that, potential ramification is that, but you would think logically that there would be less injuries. So they're going to have to go up against, the best of the best this year. It's not going to be an easy road for them, and I think they're going to get exposed. I hope I'm wrong. I hope that these guys that they believe in, particularly at center, since they, prove they don't really care about addressing that position all that much. I hope they're right. I hope that they know what they're doing, but I got to be honest, because I don't have the confidence. Their first two drafts were not very good. I don't think this one was very good. I don't think they prioritized properly. I think the moves they made were silly. Anyway, let's get to his negatives because I haven't gotten there. Erratic hand placement that results in him striking high in defenders and giving up his chest too easily. Struggles to drop his hips or generate force through the ground to anchor against speed to power. Needs to diversify his hands as a pass protector and protect his edge better. Overly reliant on using his outside hand and giving up short corners. Will need time to iron out an uptick out of his stance and pass protection that causes his hips to open early against speed off the edge. Raw in the run game in terms of footwork, aiming points, and landmarks. Will need time to revamp his technique from the ground up. And he is expected to be, a project, obviously taken in the 7th round. So there's that. Say what you will about that. But again, I don't know. I'll get to how I would have done things differently in a minute. Let me get to this other kid, because they did actually take a running back. So, they did address the offensive line. And as far as, grade. So, I think, and then they did address running back. So I think, and funny enough, this actually might be the best grade overall that they're going to get now, because I hate that they traded the 5th pick. So, so that, if I'm giving the trading of the 5th pick, I'm giving that a fail, because it was 3 straight rounds, man. And they could have gotten, a running back earlier that had a much higher grade on them, right? They could have gotten a center earlier on with a much higher grade. And I don't know. So, all right, let me get to the breakdown of this running back, and then I will tell you what I would have done differently. Give me a second. Let me find it. Is this it? So his name is, I want to say it's Jared Dokes, Gerrid. I'm gonna say it's Jared. Let's see. All right, well, this is his player bio and his overview on NFL.com. Dokes led the Bearcats in rushing twice over the past 4 seasons. First as a redshirt freshman in 2017, 87 for 513 and a 5.9 average with 2 touchdowns. Also with 14 receptions for 135 yards and a 9.6 average. 1 receiving touchdown in 9 games with 4 starts. He missed the following year due to a preseason sports hernia injury. That could be a big deal. We'll see. You can get past that kind of stuff. But, you know, as athletes, it's tough, and those can be tough injuries to overcome, and could be something that pops up again later. That's why it's, with that kind of an injury, that's why it's hard to overcome, because it's something that could be recurring. However, and then contributed as a backup in 12 contests in 2018, 100 rushes for 526 with a 5.3 average, 5 touchdowns, 8 catches for 70 yards, and 8 average with 1 receiving touchdown. Dokes again topped the squad in rushing as a senior in 2020, covering 673 yards and scoring 7 touchdowns on 144 carries, 4.7 per, and catching 14 passes for 202 yards, 14.4 per catch, and 2 touchdowns in 9 starts. A leg injury suffered in the AAC championship game prevented the Indianapolis product from playing in the team's bowl game. So he also had that leg injury. But he is, you know, dual purpose. He can catch as well. Overview: pro size with broad, thickly built lower half. Dokes can be a physical runner when he wants to be, but there are times when he gears down rather than imposing his will into contact. He lacks foot quickness and desired field vision to find pathways and yardage on his own, so power will need to become his calling card. And so, you know, and that's the thing too, is these guys in this you know, in day 3 are likely not to even have an impact at all this season. Maybe on special teams, right? That's kind of what you hope, is to get some, but you do want to have that 5th round pick, because there was some, you know, talent that was projected, you know, 3rd, 4th round, that you could have gotten in the 5th round, and you know, whatever. So we'll see. And then, you know, you also hope to be able to find a gem as well. So I like having that pick available now to be able to try and do that. But anyway, he looks more comfortable lining up behind the quarterback and attacking the flanks, where he has longer to process the defense and get can get his momentum building. He does just enough out of the backfield and has decent pass pro potential. He might go undrafted, but is enough going for him to get a look. So this guy was projected to go undrafted, and the Dolphins drafted him. So it's not uncommon that they reach for players. They have done it quite a bit over the past few years, and I think it's going to show up this year. Strength: broad lower body with thick legs. Productivity: hurt by inconsistent blocking at times. How is that a strength then? I feel like that would be on the weakness list. Productivity: hurt by inconsistent blocking at times. Whatever. Gets his speed up when hitting the outside carry. Good forward lean and lowered pads as finisher. Size and strike to pinball off tacklers when he's cranked up. Improved in 2020 at keeping his feet moving through contact. Puts pepper into his chip blocks and blitz pickups. Weaknesses: not very quick out of his stance. Blurry field vision and reading the defensive front. Lethargic feet, slow jump cuts and lateral movements. Doesn't show much savvy getting through lanes cleanly. Won't wiggle enough to elude tacklers. Fumbling issues need to be corrected. Pass catching can be a labor for him. Well, that doesn't sound very good. Especially since one of the strengths fucking was really actually a weakness. But, you know, whatever. Again, a guy that maybe will, you know, contribute on special teams. Hopefully not, you know, in the return game if he's got fumbling issues. So, you know, at the end of the day, what am I going to grade this? I mean, I'm going to grade... I'm sorry. I got to give the trade out an F because I want that pick, man. The offensive tackle, I mean, he's a major project. Probably won't fucking contribute at all this year. But it also begs the question of, you know, if you're going to keep loading up at the offensive tackle, potentially guard position, do you really believe in the, you know, stacked front of guys in front of him, right? Because you're not really addressing that, at least that one position, the most important, I would argue, on that offensive line, right? The center position, not nearly adequate enough. And the guys you're filling the rest of the line with, I don't really even think are adequate. So, you know, the best I can do is a D, I guess, because again, it's not going to help anything. You're kind of loading up in the offensive line. It's not going to help anything this year for sure. He's probably going to be a longer term project, maybe 2-3 years, right? So who knows if he's going to, work out for us, next year. Also, again, if this year doesn't work out, that 4th-year pick they got for next year, Greer and Flores likely won't even be using if they were to get fired, right? So there's that. But back to, the tackle, you need a center, whatever. But you did, I guess, again, address the offensive line. I can't like it really, because they just, I can't feel good about how they prioritize or how they do anything, especially knowing they could have done the whole front end of the draft so much differently and addressed so many needs and got premier players at those positions. And then the running back, I mean, it's a position of need, man, but like, he's a 7th round guy, and unless he really breaks out, but it sounds to me like he has some pretty significant drawbacks that he's gonna have to overcome, right? Like, he can't break, he's not particularly great at breaking out of tackles, gets, lethargic, doesn't have, great feet or lateral movement. He has fumbling issues. His production hasn't been super great. He's had some injuries. Like, what's the realistic expectation for that, right? So, getting to how I would have done things differently. Obviously, just real quick to say one more time, I wouldn't have fired Adam Gase. I actually liked the direction he was taking things. I loved his drafts. His drafts were wonderful. And, Greer was with him at that time. I thought the draft picks that they had when they were doing things Gase's way, and when Stephen Ross was staying out of it, I thought the drafts and it's pretty inarguable. I mean, the players that came out of that, there's a few stars and a lot of really good serviceable players on top of that. Anyway, so I loved that. I disagree with getting rid of him. Disagree with tanking the 2019 season. Disagree with being big spenders in free agency the next offseason. Disagree with taking Tua in the 1st round, right? I wouldn't have done that. I would have done the 2019 draft differently, the 2020 draft differently. I would have done this draft differently. But, all of those things happened, and we are here now. So how would I have done this draft differently based off of, well, they have Tua. How are you going to build around Tua? And I really just don't think that it's by, picking up Waddle. Sure, they have some, chemistry already, and that could help for sure, right? But I don't really believe that the offensive line is going to be that good. And the running game is probably still going to have some issues to work out. And I think the defense is probably going to regress from where it was last season. So, and I think this team is really going to end up struggling, and I think they're going to get exposed. I still have concerns over Tua's size, his health issues, right? He did get hurt twice last year. And, so what I would have done is at 6, they were in perfect position. They should have taken Penei Sewell. And it's funny, actually, I tweeted out with, a link to the video or whatever, Ryan Leaf on Rich Eisen's show, while Rich Eisen was doing his draft stuff, because he was one of the hosts, right? Ryan Leaf, former quarterback, had done a little segment of 5 teams in the 1st round who drafted wrong. And, sure, you can say I'm bringing this up because he agrees with me, but he's using the same points, because it doesn't matter who you have flanking the guy. If the dude's not upright, if he doesn't have time to pass, and if there aren't running lanes open for running backs, and if your running game sucks, it's not going to matter, dude. It's not going to fucking matter what Waddle does. He's not going to have time to get open, etc., etc., etc. So, not to mention, he's a rookie. He's got to learn this playbook. There's going to be dueling offensive coordinators. I mean, you would think that they're going to be actually working together and, cooperating, but there's going to be two different guys running the show. So we'll see how that works out, right? Like, I would have taken Penei Sewell at 6. I thought, because even with Penei Sewell, you still have a long way to go on that offensive line. But okay, let's say I would have taken Penei Sewell. So then, okay, I think Austin Jackson was a reach, but okay, Austin Jackson at left tackle, Penei Sewell at left guard. That shores that up, especially since you got rid of Eric Flowers. Spoiler, I would have taken Miners later. So at pick 50, instead of trading up 8 spots to get tackle Eichenberg, I would have stood at 50 and I would have picked up Miners there. I wouldn't have trusted. He ended up being there at the end of the 3rd round. So they actually could have gotten him at pick 81, which would have been an even bigger value for the pick spent. However, I wouldn't have taken that much of a risk, but I would have stood pat at fucking 50 and taken Quinn Miners there. And then that would have given you your center probably for the next, hopefully, decade, if not, whatever, but at least probably for the next handful of years. I think the kid is brilliant, and I think he's going to be in the league. I think he will take some time, and just like every rookie, he'll probably have mistakes, etc. But I think he will grow into a hell of a center in the league. Anyway, and so do a lot of people. But so Austin Jackson, Penei Sewell, Quinn Miners. And then, okay, if you like Solomon Kinley and Robert Hunt, I'm not really sold on those guys. But that's, to me, a much better situation than... because we don't even really know, to be honest, right? Like, if Penei Sewell and Miners came in, they would be left guard and center for sure. Austin Jackson's going to be left tackle, right? So, like, those 3 positions for sure. And then likely it's probably going to be Kinley and Hunt, right? On those other 2 positions. Likely. But now you have, Austin Jackson's likely to play left tackle, but it's going to be kind of up in the air for who's going to play the rest of those positions. You would likely think that it's either going to be Skura or Dieter at center, which I have to say completely fucking scares me. I don't like that at all. I feel like that the center of that line is going to be... I don't really feel confident in the entire line, because I feel like the center of that offensive line is just going to get collapsed in on a regular basis. And then teams are going to find ways to then take advantage of that after the fact or during, and then put, pressure on the corners and on the edges. And they're going to bury Tua. And I fear for the kid because he's smaller. He's got a pretty extensive injury history and one major injury to Tua, and that's pretty much it. But anyway, and then so, who's going to play guard? Well, you've got several people, among fucking Jesse Davis, Robert Hunt, Kinley, Solomon Kinley, Dieter, right? And then Fluker, I'm not, possibly at tackle, or is it going to be Hunt at tackle, or Eichenberg at tackle, or... So, like, there's a super lot up in the air. I would have taken Penei Sewell with the 1st pick. I definitely still would have gone edge rusher with the 2nd pick, but I would not have taken the dude with a potentially... or with the scary injury history and potentially scary injury future. He had to medically retire from UCLA for concussions. That's not a good thing. And, I wish the kid the best. I hope he stays healthy, etc., but he really shouldn't even be playing football. I personally would have took Greg Rousseau. Kwity Paye would have been fine. I would have took Greg Rousseau. Instead, Greg Rousseau and Boogie Basham are going to be on the Bills. That's going to be scary. So that's what I would have done in the 1st round. I would have taken Sewell and then Greg Rousseau. In round 2, they took Javon Holland, safety. So I liked the position, but I would have taken Trevon Morit. I forgot his last name now, or how to pronounce it, but you know who I'm talking about. Now, okay, everybody's, or a lot of people are talking about the back issue. Okay, fine. Take Richie Grant then. I definitely would have took Richie Grant over, and that's a legitimate concern, right? Especially for that position, back issues. The same basic principle I'm using with Jalen Phillips, right? He plays a violent position, and it's going to get even more violent in the NFL, right? He's going to play against the best of the best. And so it's scary, man. And I just wouldn't do it. So, okay, fine. Don't take Moritz or Morig, right? Whatever. Trevon Morig. I think it's Merrig. I think it's Merrig. Anyway, whatever. Take Richie Grant. But okay, they like their guy. They take him. Again. So in that case, I would have done... My pick would have been Richie Grant, not Javon Holland. But okay, that's their safety. I do like the position pick, because then I felt like... Now, the thing is, though, is I had offensive line rated higher than that as a need. But with the way the board was falling, I felt like you could, at 50, you could stay pat at 50 and get a really good offensive lineman. Miners didn't go until the end of the third round. They could have gotten him at 81. He didn't go until the end of the third round. Okay? They could have got Creed Humphrey. There's a ton of other guys that they could have got instead. But they decided to move up 8 picks, give away a third from next year, which I don't like at all. And then they picked up Eichenberg. Out of all the players they could have gotten, they picked up Eichenberg. So instead of that, I would have stood at 50 and got Miners. I would have picked him up there and then moved on feeling really fucking good. Because look, then for me it would have been Penei Sewell, Greg Rousseau, Richie Grant, and then Quinn Miners. Then with the third round pick, instead of picking up tight end Hunter Long, I would have gone running back there. I probably would have selected Sermon at that point. Because I got my offensive lineman. I got my pass rusher. Those are definitely the top needs. I would have gotten a safety. What the general consensus is, the second safety in the draft, the number 2 safety, right? Probably the number 1 overall, for if you consider, injury history to Merrig, and certainly would be for me with that information in there, right? So you get the top safety, and then you get a good third round running back that has I think his projection was probably about third round. So a third round running back in Sermon. And then, once you get to the 5th round, I would not have traded out of that pick. I would have stayed there. And I mean, at that point, with my offensive lineman, with my pass rusher, with my safety and my running back all taken care of, I mean, at this point, probably a corner, maybe another running back. Wide receiver and tight end would be the last places I would go. Maybe a linebacker, right, for those last 3 picks. So maybe another running back, a linebacker, a corner, right? A developmental corner to bring up for when Byron Jones and Xavier Howard are not here, right? Maybe even 2 corners, right, to bring up behind those guys for when they're not here, right? I've got to say I don't really have a ton of faith in Noah. I didn't really like that pick. So, right, that's how I would have done it differently. I would have done Sewell, Greg Rousseau, Richie Grant, Quinn Miners, Sermon in the 3rd. Then, honestly, I have to say I would have taken another running back and then 2 corners for the last 3 picks. In the 5th and then with the 2 with the 7. So, you know, however it falls, I don't know how exactly, you know, all the players that were available at the time. Probably, I would say probably, because there still were a number of other good running backs from what I can tell in the 5th, so they probably could have gotten their second running back there, and then, you know, with those 2 7s, probably pick up a couple, you know, developmental corners. That's what I would have done. Obviously, they did things very different, so, you know, and they're the ones in charge. They have the one, you know, they have the power, they have the choice, they have the decision, and they will have to, you know, put the product out on the field. So, with that, I'm going to wrap it up. That's really all I got. Those were the Dolphins picks and how they handled day 3. So I guess final grade, I'll give them a D overall, because again, F for the trade. I didn't like it at all. A D for the tackle that they took, and then I'll give it a C. I'll give it a C for the developmental running back, even though he's got fucking, you know, what seems to be some pretty significant hampering qualities that, you know, whatever. He's gonna be a big project. He's gonna be a big project. So, but I'll give it a C, and then give the overall grade for the round, or for the day, for day 3, a D. I mean, I just don't like how they do really anything. I don't like their prioritize, how they prioritize. I don't, you know, I don't think that they're good at evaluating. I think it's pretty clear. They haven't shown yet to be all that great at developing players. There's too much change within this organization. I mean, every year they've had a new coaching staff and a revolving door throughout the entire organization and on the roster. They're still going to have significant cuts be made just to even sign this draft class. So this, and the cap situation is, even after that, is still going to be, you know, pretty bad and pretty bleak, because they're still going to be in super cap hell. And so how are they going to pay any of these guys? I mean, even if they do develop and turn out to be really good guys, how are they even going to pay any of them? But I mean, they're going to have to make significant cap clearing moves over the next few seasons to be able to pay these guys that they drafted, if they actually really feel like they're going to be long-term guys. So there's a lot of issues for the long term, for the here and now, and I don't think the Dolphins are going to be as good as people think. I don't think they're going to be a 10-win team, but we'll see. I hope they prove me wrong. They have to prove me wrong if Brian Flores and Chris Greer want to keep their jobs. They have to prove me wrong. And it's funny, because most people are not going to be talking about them unless they start like shit in the bed or something, right? Most people are not going to be talking about the Dolphins as if, you know, their power structure, their decision-making, you know, core of people, most notably Flores and Greer, are not going to be on the hot seat because they just had a 10-win season, and you know, the media is glowing with, you know, praise for how the Dolphins did, and saying that they nailed it, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. The majority of the media, right? So, like, and the expectations are super high. If they do not meet and again, Stephen Ross is getting older and more desperate. So, to have a winner before he dies. So, I mean, let's just keep it real. So, I think I feel super confident that if they do regress this season, they will be fired. And so they have to prove me wrong. They have to prove me wrong. They have to win at least 10 games, make it into the playoffs, and, you know, thereby they will have competed within their division, hopefully, you know, keep it competitive and push for that division title. And hopefully that's how you get to the playoffs, right? Hopefully you somehow manage to win 12, 13 games and beat out the fucking Bills for the division title. I don't think that's very likely, but hopefully, right? Those are the kinds of things. You don't necessarily have to do that, but they have to make it to the fucking, especially with the expanded playoff field that there is, especially now that there's an extra game, all these different things, right? So they have to make it into the playoffs. Otherwise, I'm telling you, axes are coming down. Anyway, so with that, I'm going to get out of here. Hope you guys appreciate my perspective. If you do, make sure you hit the subscribe button, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you hit the bell if you want to get the alerts. Share my channel and videos with your friends and family. Leave your questions, comments, and concerns down in the comment section. Of course, as always, follow me on Twitter at Dillon Tartaro. And with that, I am out. I'll see y'all soon. Fins up.